Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Carrington, and you're listening to Call Talk for June 15th, 2015. Today's topic is leveraging industry benchmarks to build a business case for technology investment. Sounds smart to me. Now, if you're listening live, I'd like to invite you to be a part of the show, and you can ask questions. It's really easy. You can either email me at brian@benchmarkportal.com, or you can call in. The email is Brian, B-R-I-A-N, at benchmarkportal.com, or you can call in to 347-857-3117. Just make sure you hit the number 1 on your phone to let me know that you have a question, and I'll get you into the show. But I do want to remind you, of course, that all of our shows are archived and available for you to listen to any time that's convenient for you at our website at benchmarkportal.com. So, speaking of the show, let's get right to it, and let me introduce the host of Call Talk, Bruce Belfiore.
Well, thank you, Brian. And I'm joined today by our colleague, Amy Novak, who will be asking the questions with me. How are you today, Amy?
Hi, Bruce. I'm doing well, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you again on another one of the Call Talk radio shows.
Yes, it is great. It is great. And as you know, I'm just back from the dentist, but everything seems to be okay, and hopefully I won't slobber too much over my words. So we'll dig into it. And, you know, one of the things that we find at Benchmark Portal is that the financial business cases are often a tough spot going on. And we all know that benchmark, that is to say, call center managers are basically people. And the numbers don't always come that easy. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to confront this issue head on and talk about it more by, for technology investment. Expert on the topic for all of our listeners, Drew Wright, who's Principal Consultant with Technology Finance Partners. Welcome to the show, Drew.
Thanks for having me, Bruce. I've been leveraging Benchmark Portal's work since the Dr. Anton days, so it's really great to be here.
Okay. Well, great. And to introduce Drew for our audience, let me just say that Drew Wright enjoys connecting the dots between business needs and business cases in the call center space. So he's devoted a chunk of his career to helping, in particular, vendors build the ROI spreadsheets that help get projects approved to improve customer service and also to improve financial results. He has spoken at a number of software conferences on subjects of ROI, green IT, software as a service, pricing strategies, and customer analytics. He co-founded Technology Finance Partners in the year 2000, so he's been going in that for 15 years. And that focuses on strategic consultation for deal structuring and collaborative business case analysis. Prior to TFP, Drew filled various roles for the medical device industry. He earned a BS in mechanical engineering with an English minor from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo and an MBA from UCLA's Anderson School. So we're really delighted to have you here, Drew. And, you know my background as well. I have a CFO/finance background. And this is really an opportunity for us to give our listeners an unusual peek behind the curtains of how call center software and hardware vendors will oftentimes try to help their customers with decision-making by building business cases. So, you work with a lot of vendors, and our audience is overwhelmingly call center managers. So I'm really excited about being able to give them your insights into how the vendors work with benchmarks to build those all-important business cases. So, Drew, over to you to sort of start things off.
Okay, great. So part of the insight I want to provide your audience is that vendors are obviously interested in selling, but buyers are interested in buying. And when you can marry those two needs together, there can be a nice symbiotic relationship. And I use the term collaborative often because when I get involved, I am being paid by the vendor, but I'm really there to help the buyer sort through these challenging financial analyses and metrics that maybe aren't second nature to them. And so I'm offered as a resource for vendors to use, or for the buyers to use. And so there's a couple of intersections during a buying cycle where I can get involved. And in the early stages, it really has to do with looking at the status quo of a given environment. And it may be that the contact center manager is well aware of certain challenges, and they've started to talk to vendors, and so the vendor is, trying to say, well, I think that we can help you, but we need to sort of get a sense for whether there'd be budget available and what some of your challenges you are, and does technology help you get through those challenges. And so what we can use benchmarks for in those early stages is to make just some really rough estimates on what's some of the potential value, to see if it makes sense to continue the conversation and build out a more rigid and formal business case to get through the gating processes at a company to get budget and approval. So let me give you just a very simple example. So say you have a contact center with 250 agents, and you're able to, and you've got some challenges, whether it's reporting or workforce management, or maybe you don't have a lot of self-service, and you're not really at what we might call state-of-the-art technology for the contact center. You're looking at that, and so one of the things is the seller, the vendor, knows that you're in the West Coast, and most of your agents are in the West Coast, and so they're able to get a benchmark of about $40,000 per agent per year as a fully loaded cost. Well, 250 agents, $40,000. That's a $10 million contact center cost for the agent labor. And if they think that the technology can bring something like a 10% efficiency gain, the cocktail napkin math tells you that that's about $1 million annual benefit waiting to be had. And so you haven't really scratched the surface on the business case, but is it worth continuing a conversation and working to collaborate together to see if there is a way that some of your challenges can be resolved, and knowing that you've got this potential value to bring to your organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that sort of step-by-step component to it, too. Is it worth continuing the conversation? Are we uncovering something here that's particularly important and that needs your attention as a call center manager is key here? Yeah, so tell us how this translates for the buyer side or the manager side.
Right, and I think this is where it gets really interesting for your audience, because you would imagine that most contact centers are going to have a lot of rich data. I mean, that's certainly one thing that we've seen over the years, is that there's a lot of great data to look at. And so as you analyze that status quo situation, it helps to have these benchmarks, and if they're by vertical and you're in that certain vertical, and you can see how your peers are managing their contact centers, you can look at things like handle time, of course, but some of the more customer-centric related things like first call resolution or average speed of answer or abandon rate, IVR containment. Those types of things, compared to your current status quo, your data can give you some insights as to how you are serving your customers against your peers, and it really could highlight some opportunities, some low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, no, that's important. I was thinking, too, as you were talking, Drew, and given your background in the medical diagnostic machine area, or the medical area, that if you think about one of the things that all of us have experience with, which is a blood panel that where we have some blood drawn, it goes off to our doctors after going through the lab. And what that sheet of paper actually does is benchmark us against other people of our gender and our age, etc., and tells us whether our cholesterol is too high or, bilirubin is too low, or all that sort of good stuff. And then from that, with that in front of you, right, with those numbers staring you in the face, you are then motivated to do something about it. And you know that by improving your lifestyle or your diet or something like that, you'll actually be able to improve those numbers, and therefore, have hopefully a healthier and more successful life. And it's the same thing with what you're talking about, really. You're using those benchmarks in order to motivate you to then take the steps needed in order to get better and to become more competitive in your industry.
Well, you're cracking me up there, Bruce, because my last doctor's appointment told me I wasn't getting enough vitamin D, and so I probably because I'm holed up in a cave doing too many spreadsheets. But
aren't we all?
So I found myself after that appointment doing something that I truly thought I'd never do in my life, which is taking cod liver oil pills to improve my vitamin D. So I hope that improvements in the contact center aren't as strange as that, but there always is a solution.
Well, and I was just trying to remember, is vitamin D the one that comes from sunlight, or is that the one that comes from alcohol? I mean, maybe you need more of that.
Definitely sunlight, because I think I have the other one covered.
You've got enough of the other one. Okay, good. Well, Amy, I think you had some questions for Drew.
I certainly do, Bruce. Thanks. Drew, as you were speaking and going back and forth with Bruce, as you mentioned a couple of times or referred to our audience, in all honesty, the items that you've already started to share, and I'm hoping and feel confident with the questions I have for you as well, as you continue to share your experience and knowledge, our call center or contact center leaders are really going to see that logic and be able to look at and, kind of emulate what you are describing throughout this process. Because, again, this is a process that would be able to relate from industry to industry and as well as, area through area within the organization. So it's really important information for contact center leaders to hear about because, it's not only interesting, it's insightful, but, there are many call center managers or leaders that focus on improving the customer's interactions. They'll look at the, KPIs or key performance indicators, but when it comes down to the main manager or leader, sometimes that focus is more heavily weighted on that interaction or KPI, and it's refreshing to kind of bring them back and look at, in addition to that interaction and the KPI, how can they focus on improving, those items that could help potentially change their growth? And some of the information you've already shared has, given a little insight to that, but then knowing and being, over a call center, call centers have so much data, and you actually brought that up when you were speaking with Bruce. There is so many different metrics that call centers track and retain and archive, that by using some of that data, it wouldn't even necessarily need to be all of it because it could be overwhelming, but some of that data, they can help build some of these business cases and value within their center to show within their organization the value their center brings.
Absolutely. Actually, I wasn't sure if that was a question, but I'll just chime in.
Yes.
Yeah. So my experience, and I work in a lot of different fields, not just contact center, but I have spent a ton of time with a ton of companies in the contact center space, working with contact centers in virtually every vertical that's out there. And the way that again, I have a vendor view, but I've worked with so many end users or organizations that I feel like I kind of have both views because of the collaboration that we've done through time. And so as the vendor goes to start some of those initial engagements, they may have these things called ROI tools, and in those ROI tools, they're going to highlight values that they believe they can bring to an organization. Like a simple example might be that they're selling some sort of an IVR application. It's speech related. It's going to help increase self-service. It's going to help with identification and verification, so that you can let the agent get right into it with the customer versus having to ask all those lovely questions that you half the time feel like you already gave in the IVR. And so,
yes.
But in those scenarios, if the vendor creates an ROI tool that has indicative numbers in it, and these could be numbers that they got from BenchmarkPortal or from their experiences with customers, if they build something out that looks kind of right, that looks credible, then there's going to be a much more interesting conversation between the vendor and their prospect than if they kind of do one of those pie in the sky things where they're going to somehow eliminate all the agents and all the cost in the contact center because they've completely overstated it. So I guess what I'm getting at is that, in my experience, when the vendor's able to go in and become more of a trusted advisor, then that collaboration can occur between the two parties, and that symbiotic relationship can really help both sides in that discussion and that negotiation come towards a common goal. Because in the end, again, sellers trying to sell, buyers trying to buy, but if you're able to get it into the customer's terms where they need to fulfill certain or support certain initiatives of the organization, and so as you're able to tie those KPIs to the specific needs, then I think you can work together on these business cases collaboratively and leverage that peer review to put together reasonable assumptions that you can target as you look to grow your contact center through technology.
Drew, what you're just saying in terms of data plus relationship being important, and I think that is so crucial. And one analogy I was thinking of is the situation of parents, teachers, and the new systems that they now have to monitor what the children's grades are, right? We didn't have that when we were kids, but now you can go online and you can see, what they're getting on every test, every quiz, what they're getting for their classwork, and even the bell curves sometimes on the grades. And so if you're wanting to sort of help a child that's having some difficulties in school, just like we want to help our call centers where they're having difficulties, then you can sort of monitor that. But it only works well if you've got a good relationship with the teacher as well, and the teacher has a good relationship and wants to, see your child succeed. If you have those things all lined up in the same direction, then the numbers really become crucial, both in terms of indicating where the weak spots are and in showing where the success comes that can be celebrated by all. And so, I think that's really key. The data plus relationship plus action are the things that are so important here. Would you agree with that?
Oh, completely. And if I got your analogy correct, if the parent is the contact center manager and the child is the agent and the teacher is the vendor, we see so much better success when there is positive and engagement where everyone's towards the same end goal, which is to help our children succeed, help our agents succeed, versus a teacher that's just trying to get through the year or a salesperson that's just trying to get through the sale. There's obviously that kind of relationship and engagement. The metrics are important, but the relationship and the underlying goals are critical.
Mm-hmm. I think you did better with my analogy than I did, Drew, so thanks very much for that. Okay, good. All right, back over to Amy.
Well, as did I, Bruce, because I know when I oversaw a call center, I worked hand in hand with other areas in the company as well as vendors, working on different opportunities, looking at the cost versus that benefit and how to get that optimal working environment. So, Drew, for our audience, I was hoping that you could provide at least an example. If you have a couple, that would be wonderful. But an example on something that you may have used or historically or are presently using to support vendors and or customers.
Well, certainly, and again, I mean, I've built a ton of ROI tools, but I think where the work has been the most interesting is when our company collaborates at that individual, I'll call it a deal, a technology acquisition opportunity in your audience terms, and we look at what goals are trying to be achieved by the organization, and we're able to benchmark where they're at today through that status quo assessment and the peer review to see where maybe they could be. But with each company, there tends to be a fairly specific outcome that's desired that isn't necessarily horizontal across all of them, and so it's always interesting to hear from the contact center managers what they're specifically trying to achieve. And in some cases, maybe it's just freeing up supervisors to spend more time coaching their agents, and so what does that mean? And we get pretty dry with the numbers. I'll be honest on that topic. The spreadsheet isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but we and so there's certainly some discussions that we have there. It's like, well, okay, you just showed that you're going to provide 10% efficiency to 250 agents. So what are we going to fire 25 agents? It's like, well, no, you're not. You're going to leverage that capacity to address more channels or to answer those calls more quickly, or maybe you will avoid some hiring downstream. You'll be able to handle growth a little bit more, handle the peaks a little bit more. But in our analyses, we do typically use the agent cost because that's the lowest common denominator. I don't mean the agent's the lowest common denominator. I mean the cost is, because no company hires employees to just cover their costs. They hire employees to provide value to the organization. So if we use I use the example of $40,000 as an annual fully burdened cost for an agent, well, the agent's going to be providing $60,000 of value to the company, or maybe $80,000 or $100,000. It's going to be some multiplier of that cost. But in the analysis, you keep it very conservative because in the end, you're going to be showing this to someone in finance, and finance is, if nothing else, Bruce, you can speak up, conservative. So it's very important
to
keep it conservative and keep it real.
Yeah, that's right. Cut everything by half and see if it still works. So that's true. That's true. Well, good. Those are great insights, and I noticed that Brian has some questions for you. Brian, I think we'd like to bring it over to you at this point.
Yeah, sounds good. I did get a question on the email, and this is from Nora. And kind of like me, for those of us that are not that good at math, she's asking, how do you, Drew, kind of get started with building a business case?
Great. I love the question, and hopefully it's one that I can answer. The funny thing is that the business case isn't necessarily the spreadsheet. There's a financial analysis that's going to support the business case. So what's important about the business case is tying whatever it is that you're trying to do to the company strategic initiatives. If you have you might unearth something that maybe falls outside of that and you can show value to it. That's great, but typically your company has a set of strategic initiatives and you're trying to support those. And so the first thing is to just look at your environment. Don't worry about the numbers so much, but just what is your relationship with your own environment telling you? I mean, there's always a gut feel of what's not working. And so as you're able to identify those and kind of whiteboard, what are the things that if I had if it was Christmas tomorrow and I knew I was going to get everything, what are the items that I'd want, and you list those down on a whiteboard, and then from there you do take that snapshot of your status quo. You do look at the data, you look at the peer metrics, and you can start tying together how moving from your current state to a future state would support some of those gaps that you're feeling that you have in your current environment. So what your gut's telling you Then you look at the data to see if it supports or doesn't support what you're trying to do. Now, from a financial analysis perspective, because Nora, I'm sure, is thinking about that spreadsheet, that dreaded spreadsheet, don't be shy to leverage your vendors, because your vendors have done this a number of times. Again, if they throw a some sort of ROI calculator that's online, you can't see any of the numbers, and it's just one of those input things, and you have no idea what's going on, it's probably not going to help you as much. But if you can work with their business consultants or their value engineers and have a real discussion with your data and seeing how they take each little element and say, well, a customer sat or an NPS or an LTV improvement. I'm sorry, that was a bunch of acronyms. So customer satisfaction, net promoter score, lifetime value.
We get it. Yeah.
Yes, hopefully everyone does. But if they can look at if they say, well, we think we could improve it from A to B, and maybe the value engineer has looked at how you can put dollars and cents to that movement from A to B, because that's not really in your DNA to understand. Maybe you can understand if customer churn is reduced, what does that mean? Well, of course, you're losing that customer value, so you can probably do some math around that. But I've worked with a number of companies. I remember a telco in Canada, to be slightly specific but not breach any NDAs, who had put together some really interesting metrics for themselves on what it meant if they were to improve their likely to recommend metric, and what sort of revenue impact that would have on their company if they could get more likes essentially through social media and through person-to-person recommendations for their company. And so the value engineers or the vendors have subject matter experts that have looked at this stuff before through potentially one of your peers or through just their interactions with all the different business cases they've worked on, and they can really help you take that list that you put on your whiteboard and start pointing it to very discrete benefits that you could put calculations to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that we love, just seeing those relationships and those connections between certain metrics and certain outcomes. And so, very interesting, very interesting. I'd just like to sort of underline two other things that you were talking about too, Drew, on this question. One is making sure that you're in alignment with your company, and that apart from the numbers, apart from the financial part, just making sure that conceptually you're in line with what the company is trying to accomplish here. And the best thing to do is to go to your company's mission statement. And hopefully you have a company mission statement, and also hopefully you have the same mission statement for your contact center, or you have some sort of a modified mission statement which brings the corporate or the enterprise mission statement down to what you're doing in the contact center. And if you can tie in this initiative into that mission statement when you're making the presentation, when you're talking to your superiors about it, and you're aligning with that, that's going to really help you out a lot. So, Drew, I think that's a very important point. And the second one that I wanted to underline is that you said, make sure that you understand what you're getting from your vendor or wherever you're getting the analytics from. I think of Warren Buffett, who says, I never invest in anything I don't understand.
Right.
And he's done pretty well.
It turns out, yeah.
Yeah, Berkshire Hathaway's done pretty darn well. So I think we can all learn from that, too, and make sure that we understand it, too. And if you have to stop your vendor and ask and ask and ask, just keep asking, keep on digging for the answer so you do understand it, and don't be afraid of it. A lot of people in the contact center area are, but you'll find out it's kind of fun. So, that would be a piece of advice that I'd have that builds on what you were just talking about. Great response there. Did you have another question there, Brian?
I do. Yep, I do. And this is kind of around the business case again. Is you bring up a lot of good examples or ideas why, but actually, speaking of examples, could you give us one in particular that you've seen that worked really well as far as business case?
Well, certainly, and again, because I have that vendor centricism, success is an interesting topic because on the vendor side, of course, it's closing sales, and I have a ton of those examples. But unfortunately, I don't always get to see the 1 year, 2 year later outcome with the specific contact center. And that's a soapbox topic that I can talk about maybe later. But what I have seen is in a number of cases, and I'm thinking of one that's in the healthcare industry where a customer from a fairly large provider did a pilot where they were trying to integrate email and calls, and have that be sort of with a certain agent group that they felt was adept at handling both calls and emails, which is everyone probably on this call knows that's not always the case, but they felt like they weren't getting to emails in a timely enough fashion, and that there was a lot of idle time with the call folks that could be spent on emails. And so they ran this pilot for a group of 50 agents, and we went into that and built a business case around that, and just thought that if they could even get a 10% improvement on their blended utilization, that they were going to be more than successful and be able to pay for the technology required for that pilot. And it's not just the technology; don't forget process and people. But there's a change management piece to it, of course. And so what happened was we were able to go back a year later and take a look, and we did see that there was actually more like an 18% bump in that, and so that yielded a few $100,000 in annual value, and that allowed for an enterprise-wide adoption. So I guess maybe the moral of that one story is that you don't necessarily always have to just change your entire organization at once. It is okay to target a certain group and take a look at it, see how it does, and if it works there, then expand from there.
And Drew, if I can just jump in, the other question was kind of around the same idea of how often should you revise this plan? Obviously it takes some effort, energy, and resources to do it. How often should we re-look at or revisit this idea?
Right. Yeah. No. Maybe. And now we are probably getting towards that soapbox a little bit, because one of the things that's been frustrating in my the second career of mine is that vendors sell and then they move on. Contact center managers are very, very busy people, and so they don't always take the time after technology is acquired to see how successful it was. And then bluntly, my organization isn't paid to do this work either. So there is this sort of glut of post-implementation analysis to see how well things, have occurred, so that you can, see if you had success or didn't have success. And so I think that, it's pretty typical in the contact center arena that you get, monthly reports that show how your KPIs are doing, and I think it would be great if you are a contact center manager, that you take a look at those KPIs and see what the trends are after technology acquisition, and I personally feel like you owe it to yourself to see that your hard work, how it did, and if it's not doing what you're expecting it to do, well then take the time to see if it's because of the technology or because of other changes, and maybe you don't have the adoption you're expecting, and you can pull the vendor back in and say, hey, what's up? How come this isn't working? And so I kind of think it's it is some sort of a monthly or quarterly review to see how progress is, and keeping your vendor engaged, especially to make sure that everyone's successful.
Gotcha.
Well, Drew, I can't speak for the audience members, but just your responses to their questions I found very insightful as it relates to, just the call center experience as a whole, and those that are leading call centers, and how building a case or a business case can actually be applied. The example you gave to the second individual who had contacted Brian, as it related to an example, a positive example, you clearly stated an example that can be used showing the value of the contact center within the organization just by looking at one of the metrics. So just to imagine if you had, multiple metrics that you needed to review and look at that cost versus benefit, ratio and break that down into a business case, it's certainly enlightening to hear what you've shared. So I'm hoping that the audience has gained as much insight as I have just from listening to you.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I said at the beginning that this would be kind of a peek behind the curtains, and I always think of the Wizard of Oz, when I think about that. But, bringing the vendor process, to our listeners so that they can think about what's going on and how they can leverage it to their advantage and get the transparency that they need. So that's good stuff. So thank you very, very much for being with us, Drew. And with that, I think we're a little bit past our time, so I'll hand things over to Brian. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. That was great. I appreciate it. And, of course, Bruce and Amy, for your great questions. And want to invite everyone to join us again next month for another edition of Call Talk. And remind you that we do have all of our shows on BenchmarkPortal.com's website at Call Talk. So head there anytime you want and check out all the great topics we have there for the last 5 years we've been doing the show. It's amazing. So that's it for today's show, though. I want to make sure that you keep your headsets steady and your fingers ready. This is Brian Carrington from Benchmark Portal signing out. Have a great day. And that's a wrap.